Okay, good morning, Vacaville. I'd like to now call to order the special meeting for the Parks and Recreation Commission for the City of Vacaville, February 6, 2021. We appreciate everyone who is participating in today's Park and Recreation teleconference meeting. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. Please bear with us as we attempt to use remote tools. Instructions to call into the meeting or participate from a computer are provided on the agenda on the city's website at www.cityofvacaville.com. Callers who wish to comment can press *9 to get into the speaking queue. Computer users can click the raise hand button within their Zoom controls to request to speak. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Berumen.
Present.
Commissioner Leonard.
Here.
Commissioner Lujan. Commissioner Thompson.
I am present.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Here.
Vice Chair Rucker.
I'm here.
And Chair McMahon.
Present. Agenda item 2, Pledge of Allegiance. This morning, we will be led by our park planner, Hugh Hesterman. Sir.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. If you're able, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. We are at item number 3, presentation and workshop. Director Walker, I will turn it over to you to introduce our consultant. I would like to say this. I know we have a lot of information to get through this morning, and what I'd like to do for the commission and the commissioners, if you have questions during the presentation, please raise your hand. We'll address them during that portion of the presentation. And for public comment, we will take all public comment at the end of the presentation. So with that said, Director Walker, if you would do the honors of introducing the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Hopefully in this world of Zoom, you're all able to sit back and enjoy a cup of coffee or a glass of orange juice this morning while this is presented to you. This has been a long time coming. We're really, really excited to bring it to you. So I want to say thank you all for attending and getting involved in the future of Parks and Recreation in our city. Our current Parks and Recreation Master Plan is nearly 30 years old, and the city's general plan calls for an updated plan. This morning, our consultant, MIG, will present the draft plan. So due to the limited time we have, we're going to jump right in and get started. And I would like to introduce Lauren Schmidt and Ellie Fiore from MIG.
Thank you, Carrie. It's nice to see we also have some members of the general public in attendance. I'm Lauren Schmidt from MIG. I'm the principal in charge of this project. And joining me this morning is Ellie Fiore, the project manager and planner for MIG. Ellie's going to share her screen, we have a presentation. We also have a few Zoom polls along the way, and that's something that attendees, not commissioners, we would invite you to participate with that. So Ellie, I'll turn it over to you to take it away.
Sounds good. Tracy, can you enable my screen sharing?
You should have it, Ellie. I made you co-host. Are you not? Does not give you the option? Oh, there.
Everyone can see that? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, good morning. We are going to go through this presentation relatively quickly so we can maximize our time together this morning on questions and comments. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. We'll do about a 20 to 30 minute presentation, then turn it over to the commissioners for their comments and questions, moving on to the public, and then that last chance for the commissioners to comment before we wrap up at about 11 this morning. So as Carrie said, this has been a long time coming. We going back to 2013 when the city invested in the recreation needs assessment, or the RNA as we call it, which was a big look at, what are the what's the state of the system? What are the needs that the community has? This was an effort that, like our plan, looked both at qualitative and quantitative data and community outreach to identify what were the needs of the system. A couple of years later, we followed the general plan. And so the Parks and Recreation Master Plan was called out in the general plan of 2015 as an implementation item. And so this fulfills that mission. The Parks and Recreation Plan is a big look at what's going on in the city. So what is the state of the system today? What are the conditions? What are the community needs? And how can we set the table for improvements and investments and decision-making for the next 15 years or so? We want to make sure that everything that the commission and the council invest in and the staff are working on is consistent with what the community tells us their values and priorities are. This is a part of a larger process, and the city staff is always, as you know, very busy working on multiple projects. And so in parallel, we did an assessment of some of the bigger recreation facilities in the city. We also developed a park master plan for Centennial Park, which we'll hear more about in the coming months. Looked at the feasibility of a sports complex in the city, and did a development impact fee study to establish the relationship of these improvements and some funding tools to make sure that there is funding in place for all of these. So very quickly, you can see here some of the process. We started in the fall of 2017. Very heavy on the community engagement up front. Wanted to check in with the community, make sure we were going in the right direction. A little bit of a slowdown in 2020, along with everything else to respond to COVID, but we're excited that we now have a draft plan that we're moving into the adoption phase. So very quickly, the agenda included a link to the draft document, which you all should have the ability to view. And there are 6 chapters with some appendices in greater detail. And just wanted to kind of give everybody a quick view of what is in that document. So our first step was to, assess what is on the ground today. As I said, this is kind of the big look at the city, the Parks and Recreation system within the city, and what is available to the residents of Vacaville and visitors. And there is a great variety of recreation programs. One of the things we heard loud and clear from our community engagement was that people have a high level of satisfaction with what the city staff who are here today are doing in the recreation division. So it's a great place to start. As I mentioned, things are a little bit uncertain today, but the city and the department have done a great job at pivoting and adapting and maintaining basic levels of services and programs for the community. Not yet known what the financial impact will be in the long term. Obviously, there's a drop in revenue with fewer programs going on. So we assume, going forward, that there may be some impacts on the timing of what we're proposing in this plan, but we don't think it fundamentally changes the direction of any of our recommendations. So very quickly, I will step through our process and what we heard through engagement. Starting in the winter of 2017, at the end of the year there, we did a series of what we call pop-up events. So at the Rec Expo, at community centers, at various places around the city, and got some input on, very high level vision, goals, and wishes for the system. That was supplemented a couple months later by an online survey that was map-based, through which we got several hundred responses really great distribution of residents from around the city, as you can see here. And this, as I mentioned, was really, as all the community engagement was intended to confirm what the city had heard through their 2013 recreation needs assessment. And we did, in fact, have some really great consistency and, verified a lot of the priorities that had come out of that previous effort. So you can see here are some of the things that rose to the top of the list for the community, both in 2013 and in 2017-18. Our engagement continued throughout the length of this process. In 2019 and 2020, we pivoted to getting from, what are our visions and what's our wish list for the city to what are our priorities, given that the city has limited resources and time. We kind of created a system of exercises that forced residents to consider trade-offs. And so what were their priorities given limited resources? And you can see here how those ranked. In parallel, we were doing some assessment of, again, what's on the ground and what's the status of the system here in Vacaville. The table was really set by the general plan, as I mentioned. And so there are 3 park categories and standards that were established by that document that guided our analysis. So what we did was a mapping exercise where we looked at locations of the neighborhood parks and how walkable they are. If the goal is to have every resident in the city within a 10-minute walk of a neighborhood park, which is a smaller park. And so you can see here what the quote unquote service area is of those given the roadway and sidewalk network. So in orange here, you can see some areas that are not currently served, but when we layer in the planned parks, as you can see, the city is well positioned to add parks to the system as it grows. That improves coverage dramatically. Community parks are the larger parks in the system. So Centennial is a great example of that. And again, this is a map that shows the service radius of those. So again, you can see kind of at the fringes here in orange, some neighborhood residential areas that are quote unquote underserved. But again, when you layer in the planned parks, really great geographic coverage. And so this is a composite map, essentially. And so basically what this exercise told us is that geographically, the city is doing really well at providing park space and access to parks. And so one of the focuses of this project was to look at, as the city grows, how can it continue to add amenities to the system? How can it improve the quality of the parks? How can it improve access to places that already exist while they add new features to the system as the city grows? So this is just a quick list of the themes that emerged through our assessment that really drove the recommendations of this plan. Very quickly, the document outlines a vision for the next 15 years. So this is a statement of what we hope the city of Vacaville and the park recreation system will look like in 14 years from now. And we established a series of goals, which you can see here, that again were both derived from the community engagement and became the sort of foundation and structure of the plan itself. And so my colleague Lauren is going to step through how these were translated into recommendations and go over some of the highlights of this plan itself.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, so the plan has 2 chapters that focus on the recommendations, and chapter 4 has higher level policy recommendations, and those are organized by goal. So what I'm going to do is just give a few highlights from each one to kind of give you the flavor of what it covers. So goal 1 really addresses play, recreation, and the close to home parks. So one of the key pieces is to continue providing that 10-minute walk park access for all residents. As you see from the maps that Ellie shared, that's a place where Vacaville has really shown in making sure there's plenty of parks distributed from town. But what we heard from the community is another point under Goal 1, which is they'd like to see a few more things in some of the existing parks, particularly the neighborhood parks. So enhancing function and interest is a big piece of that, with high value enhancements. So shade, seating, restrooms, more picnic areas, and strategic lighting. The idea of having multifunctional spaces so you can have a couple things to do when you're at a park. And then also under Goal 1 are some recommendations that address different recreation facilities and being able to expand capacity at those. And another key theme that came up, we heard quite a bit from the public, was about making parks and facilities more welcoming for people with disabilities. And so there's direction around that and striving for universal access in parks and facilities. Goal 2 addresses natural areas. That was something that emerged very strongly. It hadn't been looked at as strongly in the recreation facilities needs assessment. But through the general plan and also this effort, there's a lot of interest in being able to connect with nature through the park system. People highly prioritize that. And so Goal 2 addresses protecting and preserving open space and natural areas and recommendations around that, integrating native plants and trees in more developed neighborhood parks and community parks, as well as in the more protected open space system. Wildlife and insect habitat, natural play, that was something that came up, different types of play experiences. So being able to have more interactive and more evocative play environments. This is also the goal that addresses environmental education and more nature programming, and then looks at some of the physical directions for the park. So recharging water in parks, addressing tree canopy. Goal 3 addresses that strong community desire for a more interconnected trail and pathway system. So this goal talks about safe routes to parks. So using the street and bike infrastructure, as well as neighborhood walking routes to get to parks throughout the community, including a recommendation around connecting all the parks. This is a place of collaboration with the Public Works Department and looking at expanding that network along streets, in utility and right-of-way corridors, and along the creek corridors. Including a bicycle transportation plan, because that allows access to state funding that can help with the trail system. And there are recommendations around expanding trails and trailheads within the accessible open space network, and that's also addressed in the projects. Goal 4, this is around identity and economic vitality, and the park system is a key contributor to that. So a citywide signage and wayfinding program that will complement for both residents and visitors the park experience and make it a little easier to navigate through the trails to the parks. This goal also talks about public art and the integration of public art into the park system. And that's a key way to implement the public art master plan. Very popular Creek Walk concert series, which will be able to resume in the future, maintaining that as a key community building event and potentially growing that in the future. And just generally expanding park program and concerts in and around downtown. That's something that the downtown plan is also looking at. More arts and culture programming is addressed here, and then opportunities and directions around interpreting local history in parks and facilities. Goal 5 addresses recreation programs and recommendations around that. So more culturally diverse programming, more intergenerational programming so families can participate in activities together. The city has a very good base of programming for people with disabilities and therapeutic recreation, and building from that strength, continuing to increase focus in that area. Some new ideas here too, mobile recreation and pop-up play. And that's something that was being discussed before COVID, but the pivoting that the department has done has even built more skill in that area. Using pilot programs to test new ideas, that's kind of what this whole past year has been, but it's a good way to try new approaches. A lot of interest in more community events, so there's some direction under this goal around adding more of those. And pre-COVID, there was waiting lists for a lot of different types of programs that were really limited by capacity. And so several program areas are mentioned. Sports programs is one, and the aquatics program is another one. And both of those have a facility component that's addressed in the project list. Goal 6 is really about what I would call the back of the house stuff, about managing the services, about that customer service. You know, we heard there's a high level of satisfaction. And so this is really about continuing that. And there is a recommendation around the pandemic recovery and strategically moving forward. This also around staffing and making sure there is adequate staffing to support PRMP initiatives. Direction around volunteerism, there's some interest in that, and there's a great opportunity for the department to really become the kind of point of contact around that. Parks maintenance, people are satisfied with that. There are some things like natural resource management that hasn't been as much part of the portfolio. So there's some discussion around that, and then around kind of the back of the house data tracking, so that there are some good decision-making tools moving forward. Goal 7, this addresses funding, very important. And Ellie touched on some of the parallel projects like the sports complex and the development impact fees project. But you know, for members of the public in particular to just be aware of, there's two types of funding. And so there's the funding for capital projects, and then there's the funding for operations and maintenance. So for the programs, for maintaining the parks, and there are recommendations in each of those categories because there's different sources of funding that can be used for each. So then I want to touch on the park development guidelines. This is something that the city has not had before, and there are a lot of developer-provided parks, and there's also an interest in renovating some of the existing parks. So these park development guidelines are intended to provide some guidance around that. And so they're organized by the different park classifications, and for each one, this talks about the function of the park type, the types of sites This would be more for new parks. But then there's a kind of minimum set of features that should be provided in every park of the specified type. And that really starts to frame out the project list that's in the final chapter. There are also an additional menu of park features that are appropriate for each classification. And in some cases, there's types of park features that aren't appropriate, like in an accessible open space area, having something that really conflicts with that open space use. But what this does moving forward is it gives a starting place. So when it's time to do community engagement around, let's say, a neighborhood park in your own neighborhood, this kind of gives a starting place and a point of discussion. So it'll set the stage for future projects. And so just as an example of what that looks like, for neighborhood parks, the minimum park features address a lot of the things that people say they are very interested in having close to home. So the trees, the picnic areas, and site furnishings, benches and picnic tables that make it possible to spend a few hours in the park. A lot of interest in walking, and so making sure that every park has a looped walking path with a measured distance in it. It's a very simple thing, but it really makes it more usable. And then making sure there's some open lawn area that can be suitable for a lot of different uses. This is that multi-use feature. So that's an example. We have guidelines in the plan for community parks and other park types as well. So the final chapter is the implementation chapter. This is where we find the project list and the action plan. So the capital project list, there are projects in neighborhood, community, and regional parks. Every existing park is addressed. That was a high priority for people wanting to see reinvestments in existing parks. The planned parks are also included here, and many of those are in process or have had master plans or partial development. And so this also acknowledges what's to come and what's been thought about for some time. There's a project list around accessible open space, and within that project list, there's a trail expansion project with the idea that there is a budget every year to keep expanding the trails and accessible open space. And there's a budget every year to develop more trailheads. So addressing that community priority of getting close to nature and having more interconnected parks and more trail opportunities. And then there's also recommended projects in special purpose facilities. This is an area where a number of special studies have looked at some of the facilities already and are still in the process of considering options. So this is structured a little differently because there are cost ranges depending on the option. And so as an example, the sports complex study looked at 4 different options, and it hasn't been recommended which of the 4 should move forward. And so the cost range for that includes the low-end option and the high-end option to capture the full range of what's being still under study. Another thing to think about with the capital project list is there's 3 categories of projects. And so the biggest category of projects are what are those reinvestment and enhancement projects. So those are the things that are touching the existing park system. There's also a set of projects that are development driven. So that's really not within the control as much of the city. It's really when a development moves forward, then a planned park can move forward. And then some of the more major projects are what we would term aspirational projects. So things like a new recreation center at Centennial Park, or building the sports complex, or renovating Lagoon Valley Park, which again is a really high priority for the community. These are very big ticket projects that are really important, but funding still needs to be identified for those. So just, you know, the capital project list, we've pulled all of that together, and you can see there's investment. And again, keep in mind, this is a 15 to 20 year plan, so it's very long term. But investment in neighborhood parks, much of that is in existing parks. In community parks, they're bigger, they have more facilities in them. A big investment there. Much of that is additional phases of other parks. One regional park is Lagoon Valley, and looking at first community-driven update to that master plan and management plan, and then implementation on that. And then accessible open space, and then the range of possibilities with special purpose facilities. So there's a lot, as you review the plan, there is a lot to comment on those projects, and I would definitely encourage everyone to turn to that chapter and look at your local park and make sure the parks that you visit, you like the direction, or if you have feedback, to share that. So another key piece of the plan is the action plan. And so this is really a rolling 5-year plan, and it's a work plan for both staff and for the commission. And so these are the active projects, and there are 6 criteria to look at what should be on that action plan and what should move forward, because as Ellie mentioned at the beginning, Vacaville always has a lot going on and is able to move forward quite a few things at one time, but that whole list of projects can't all be advanced at one time. So quick win, always making sure there's active progress. So, maybe it's a new picnic area. These tend to be smaller projects. Is there funding and staffing to be able to take on the project? Completing phased projects. There's a lot of things that have been phased in over time, and by constantly adding additional phases, that's how the park system has gotten to where it is today. Revenue generation and cost reduction has always been a focus for the department. It's a business-oriented department that has performed really well. This is going to be even more important coming out of COVID. Last 2 criteria, aligning with other projects. We mentioned there's all these things going on in the city, and downtown plans and art plans, and the park system allows for a lot of integration with those plans, and so looking for those opportunities. And then finally, there are limited time opportunities, such as Prop 68 grants with the state of California, or a potential partnership. And so making sure that those opportunities don't get lost. So there's a draft action plan in the draft document. The intent and the process of this action plan is this is just the first one. And each year, this will be something that the commission and staff update to keep a constantly rolling set of projects. So this is another place where important for members of the public to review this, and you know, it aligns with those criteria and which align with what we heard from that prioritization exercise that Ellie mentioned. So this action plan moves forward some of those larger capital projects, and it spreads out what's happening across the city, so that it's not all happening, let's say, downtown or at major facilities, but that everybody benefits and every neighborhood will see something happen within their local park. And I'm not going to go through every gory detail here. And so then I just turn your attention, as I mentioned earlier, as you review this on your own, looking at that project list in detail, that's the huge menu from which that action plan is going to be developed. And so it goes from the project list, the larger project list, onto the action plan. And so with that, we would turn to questions and discussion.
Lauren and Ellie, thank you so much for the presentation. At this time, we'll go ahead and open it up for commissioner comments or questions for our consultant, please. And I see a couple hands raised. Commissioner Leonard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Is this slide deck, and I apologize if this has already been stated, is this slide deck going to be made available to the public on our website?
Yeah, we're happy to provide that. And I assume that's totally fine. Yes.
I apologize, Lauren. This is Carrie. Yes, we certainly can do that. Make that available on the website.
Great, thank you. It's just a really concise kind of summary of the more lengthy report, so that might be helpful for the public. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Vasquez.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Commissioner Vasquez. Just wanting to thank everybody for their efforts and all the work put into this document. It's a really great document in terms of providing goals and vision for Vacaville's future of Parks and Rec. So, but one thing that I did notice, or that at least I felt was missing from the beginning of the plan, is there seems to be a bit of a gap in the introduction and the vision and the goals. And this is something that I believe should drive, and at least should drive, every conversation that we have about Parks and Rec. But I was pretty surprised not to see any statements in the intro of the document about equity and inclusion. I know that as you get into the weeds of the document around the goals, that these start to come into focus, but for it to be 2021 and that these core values seem to be missing from, you know, a city document is a little bit confounding for me. I think that, you know, as a town, we should want to ensure equity inclusion of all of our residents in Parks and Rec. And I think that there's examples that we can point to, either comparables, but also the National Recreation and Parks Association has a whole document on how to create equity-based system master plans. And so I think that there's stuff that we can point to, but I would really like to see in the introduction and in the foundation of this document, you know, a mention, description, shared goals around equity inclusion within Parks and Rec. I think that, you know, this seems to be a shared value communicated by City Council. I feel like I've heard it repetitively through various meetings. And I think it's something that as a commission, we should really share, but also as city staff. And secondly, I'm also surprised that it wasn't there because it seems to be a part of MIG's core values. I mean, literally on their homepage, there's a slide on equity and inclusion. And so I just think that, you know, as commissioners and as city staff, we really need to use this lens and a shared value of equity and inclusion. You know, while this plan is very descriptive and very concerned about like proximity of parks, and that Vacaville obviously has really great coverage when you look at these maps of parks and recreation accessibility. I think that we also need to be concerned about you know, other accessibility things like ease of access, functionality of park amenities, how and where we engage the community. You know, the document mentioned that we're meeting folks where they are, but I don't necessarily always feel like I believe that, and I think that we could be doing a lot more. And also just affordability of programs. And so sometimes I feel like, as I've been on the commission almost a year now and been engaged in the community through youth sports, I feel like sometimes there's a misalignment of values between elected and appointed members and city staff far too often, and we're working within like constraints instead of thinking outside of the box. And, you know, I have some examples, but I think that incorporating equity and inclusion into the plan can create more accountability for both commissioners and city staff, but even city council when they're considering Parks and Rec through the budget process, through the general plan, et cetera. But, you know, like I mentioned, I do have examples, and I feel like, you know, we can and should really want to include this in the master plan. You know, I bring forward an example of like just recently Markham Brown and like the request to have a flat infield space at Trower Park. Like instead of incorporating this into the park and making that specific park more equitable, you know, we're talking about, well, we can just put it at Brown Street, which then to me disenfranchises that surrounding community near Trower Park, which is very accessible to that relative neighborhood. Another example that I have concerns with are the community engagement pop-up events on this plan. So when you look at the location of all of these pop-up events, they were almost all on the 95688 side of town, with the exception of, I think, 2 events that were held at VPAT, which to me also only engages with a specific demographic, right? Folks who are able to afford leisure activities such as attending theater programs. And so, you know, my question to the group and to the community staff and to MIG too was like, how did we meet the 95687 residents where they are in the engagement of this master plan and their needs? Because I've lived on the 95687 side. I know the parks, you know, the neighborhood parks in that area, and, you know, they need a lot of love. And so while I see the map and the appendix and the coverage of the map-based survey, and it looks like we got a lot of folks around town responding, you know, how come there wasn't a pop-up event over on the 87 side? And so I think when we talk about community engagement efforts being equitable and accessible, you know, we need to think about how we're including all areas of town. And I think that we're still largely lacking on the 95687 side. My last point, not my last point. I have a lot of points about the other chapters of the document, but my last point for right now is I think that there should also be a land acknowledgement statement in this document. I think, you know, many folks in our town probably don't even know that our town, our parks and recs areas sit on the indigenous Patwin land. And I think that we can do a lot more in terms of incorporating educational signage and programming, especially programming outdoors, that acknowledges the land that we're living on and acknowledges the indigenous folks of the Patwin Nation. And so I think that there's a little bit more that we can do in terms of drafting out the introduction and vision of the plan. But I do have other comments about the rest of the chapters, so I don't know where or how we're going to be giving that feedback. But that was just my initial thought, and I just really appreciate everybody's efforts on this, but I think we can do more and advocate more for equity and inclusion. Thank you.
Commissioner Vasquez, thank you very much. I would like to say this. I've been on the commission for 4 years, and every recreation expo I've ever been to has been on the 8-7 side. So, you know, in a town that's 26 square miles. I think that we collectively have tried to do a really good job at, being inclusive and equitable to everybody in this town. So the expos I've been to have been at the VPAT, as well as the Three Oaks Community Center. So they have been on the 8-7 side. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. To the consultant, would you like to address some of the questions by Commissioner Vasquez?
Sure. So really appreciate that feedback, Commissioner Vasquez. I think that it's a really important opportunity because, as you say, it's a little buried in the document. The intent is there, and that's actually one of the reasons why there's such a focus on, what goes in the parks. That reason that you said, just having a park there that doesn't have much in it isn't achieving equity goals. So, being more upfront with an equity and inclusion piece in the introduction, so we're not waiting till we get to vision and goals, is I think a really good perspective. We've been buried in this document, for 6 or 8 months. So having all of your outside perspective is really great on that. The other thing on the land acknowledgement, I think that's a great idea. When we do that, we would definitely not want to make that without some engagement of the Indigenous community, and would encourage, the city to also kind of take that stance. So yeah, really appreciate those comments and your attention to making sure we elevate those values more deliberately in the plan draft.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions or comments from the commission?
Chair McMahon, I know I went through the document pretty thoroughly, and I have questions and comments pretty much in each chapter. I guess I thought that this activity today, we were going to be going through like each section. And so, I guess what is the proper way to provide this feedback, if not verbally, publicly in this meeting?
Yes, ma'am. I think now's your opportunity with the consultant here. So if you'd like to go ahead and address it, and probably just start from the beginning, ma'am.
Okay. Let me think. Let's see, where do I want to start?
One other thing I would just mention too is this isn't the only opportunity to comment either. If you have gone through and made a markup of the document and there's things you want to share in the meeting, we definitely welcome that. But if you also have a detailed markup, that can be passed through Tracy, who's collecting all of that, and brought into the edit of the document. We didn't mention that up front, but Tracy is collecting written comments as well.
Okay. Well, I'll pause for a minute. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And we can definitely come back to you, Commissioner Vasquez. I do have a comment or question. So on addressing Chapter 6, talking about creating and updating a 5-year action plan. So what about master plans that have already been approved, recently approved, such as Owl Patch or Eleanor Nelson? How do those, or why are those not in the 5-year action plan?
Well, some of them are, and if you feel like something is missing and should be in there that's not, that's definitely an important piece of feedback. It's a draft. We're here vetting it. thinking about those criteria and the next 5 years, if you feel like something is missing, we definitely want to get that in the next draft.
Okay, thank you. Any further commissioner comments or questions for MIG? Commissioner Vasquez, okay, let's see there. Vice Chair Rucker, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. More just wanted to echo, sorry, my daughter is here with me. Hi. Just really wanted to echo Commissioner Vasquez's comments. Mostly, I just really appreciate her attention to detail. And Commissioner Vasquez, I really appreciate your just attention to inclusivity within the parks. I think a lot of people think this can be certainly just strictly a social issue, not pertaining to parks, and it really pertains to every part of life. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, because equity inclusion is incredibly important. So more of a comment to that. I know MIG has been an incredible partner to us for the past couple of years. I've been really fortunate to sit in some of these meetings and chat with the team, and so I know going forward that every piece of input is going to be validated, by them and heard, and hopefully we can, just really make that more of a statement for our parks. And I really love the idea of the land piece. I think the historical context of where we are as a city is really important. And I know a couple of years ago when we moved forward with Nacha Mesta, we really honored the land that Nacha Mesta came from, and we honored the heritage that specific land was dedicated towards. So I would love to see that really going forward in our parks efforts. Yeah, you too. But that's all I got.
Thank you very much for that, sir. And Commissioner Vasquez.
Thank you, Commissioner Rucker. I really appreciate it. I think sometimes some of my comments or and feedback is not always the easiest to give, and I think that bringing attention to issues of equity and inclusion are not always the easiest to be received either. So I think that I just appreciate the support. So I did have a couple of questions and comments about some of the recommendations by goals. There was one specifically, 1B6, which talks about additional exclusive agreements. And so just wondering, what does this mean for new groups, and how does it impact our existing youth sports leagues who have exclusive use agreements with the city? Another comment about 1B28, just about accessibility in terms of creation of splash pads. I know we've had these ongoing conversations, but could the goal also include accessibility to the Graham Aquatic Center, like reduced cost events or days, to allow for accessibility in terms of affordability? For goal 2, I think this is probably where, when I was thinking about land acknowledgement, where we are talking about connecting people to nature, that this would fit in the best. And I also agree with Lauren about, like establishing and building that relationship. I know the county has a relationship with our local tribe. And so I think that building kind of that gap between the county and city and the tribe, I think that that would be great. And I do agree it probably needs to come from the top, from council. And so I will definitely be writing some of the council members after this to talk about land acknowledgement and how we acknowledge it here in the city of Vacaville. For goal 3, just in reading that, I'm wondering if we can include and incorporate something around bike safety programming, because, if we want to get into a situation like similar to Davis, where we've got bike routes and bike activity all over town, that I think then the Parks and Rec department also needs to consider bike safety programming. For goal 4, I think again, you know, like I have been pretty vocal and adamant about utilizing and tapping into existing constituents when we talk about communications or community engagement. And I think just really acknowledging that here in the master plan, that there are existing constituents that the staff can reach into, whether it's youth sports leagues or folks that have used their programs prior. I think that that should be highlighted. For goal 5, there's really no mention of affordable programming. And I think that there could be some sort of addition to that, or at least a consideration about affordable programming that folks can utilize. I think that like, while I feel like the program is affordable for me, you know, how does it work for all of our residents in terms of affordability? Some of the goals in 6, I think specifically 6B4, if we could add or incorporate training for and professional development for the team around community engagement techniques and strategies. I know I've been at a lot of community engagements recently, and I think this is still an area that that can be available for professional development for the team. And I think just thinking beyond existing programs, but actually meeting folks where they are, whether it's at a specific park or at a specific baseball or softball field or sports field, meeting folks exactly kind of like where they are. For goal 6C4, there was a mention about regular inspections. Like, what does this mean? How often are those inspections? That seemed a little vague to me. For 6D, it seemed odd that there was nothing in there around customer service and technology, like programming for rec programs, registration programming, app-based systems or services. I thought it was odd that in goal 7A, there's no mention of general funds and for capital funding. And then goal 7B10, there is a mention of cell towers, and I think as revenue generating. And while I think that that seems like a great idea in theory and practice, I know it can be very, very challenging. As someone who formerly served on Bobby Sox and was at Nelson frequently, there's multiple cell towers in Nelson, inside Nelson. And I know it was often a safety concern for the group, but also it impacted the maintenance of the space, like the trucks coming in and out and ripping up the asphalt. And so I think, you know, even considering accessibility and where those things are located. But those are just some of my initial thoughts on some of the goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Your comments are always appreciated, and your attention to detail is very much appreciated, ma'am. Would our consultant like to address any of the questions proposed by Commissioner Vasquez?
A lot of really good content there, and really do appreciate your attention to detail and review. There's some things that will be very easy to add. Not so many questions that I heard. The one that stuck out for me was around the exclusive use agreements. And so one of the things that that's really trying to get at is it's fine to have agreements with groups that even grant use in exchange for things, but not to limit other public users so that, you know, a particular asset is really tied up. It's something we see in you know, communities around the country as well as in Vacaville, that you can get more use and more users in public parks. And while there's valued partnerships, you want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to use a community facility. And so the intent is not to discourage those kinds of effective partnerships that have worked well in Vacaville, but to make sure that, it's not at the detriment of other user groups. And it actually is intended to get at kind of what you're talking about with new groups. If a user group has exclusive use to a particular facility, then an up and coming group doesn't necessarily get access to it. So, there might be some more clarification needed there, but hopefully that response kind of clears up your question about what that's intended to do.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Vasquez, would you like to follow up on that, ma'am, or we can go to the next commissioner and we can come back to that?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And Commissioner Leonard?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's really great information coming from commissioners and their perspective that I think is really important that we capture. And so I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better for the remainder of the meeting that we submit our notes rather than discuss them where the information or thoughts may be lost, that we submit our notes to staff so that they can be recorded and referenced back in an easier manner. And for the sake of time, if 7 commissioners go through all of our notes, we're going to be in an 8-hour meeting, not a 3-hour meeting. So I'm wondering if we can maybe agree to submit thoughts in writing. If we have questions and things that we want to know more about, maybe we can focus on questions. Would the fellow commissioners be amenable to that?
Absolutely, ma'am. And I will absolutely, let's do that. I think that's a great suggestion. I want to ensure that our public have an opportunity to ask questions of the consultant. So I appreciate that, Commissioner Leonard. With that said, any further comments or questions, Commissioner Leonard?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Thompson, I did see your hand up. Do you want to address something now, sir, or would you like to just submit questions or comments? Go ahead, sir.
I think what Commissioner Leonard's recommended makes a lot of sense. I just had a few comments, and I guess one I would like to go ahead and put out there is I see several references in the document, throughout the document, about sports fields, and as we all know, that is very near and dear to my heart. And I'm wondering about, and I'm not an expert here, I see separate listings for baseball, softball diamonds, and rectangular fields, football, soccer fields, and I'm wondering if they can be incorporated into one field. I've been at complexes in other cities that have rectangular fields that can also accommodate diamonds. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that's an opportunity to get more multi-use in a single, because those types of complexes are very expensive. But I do, so I'll cut it off there. I do agree with Commissioner Leonard's comments to submit those things in writing and we can review them at a later date. I think that makes a lot of sense, but thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. And again, this is a working document, so I appreciate that. And we will be seeing this again, obviously, here in the near future at the commission as a final draft. Commissioner Leonard, ma'am.
Thank you. I apologize. If I can just add on to, I think because this is a draft, there's always going to be things and room for improvement. That's the whole point of this forum and review. But I think it's also helpful for commissioners when providing feedback to focus on what they like, because often there will be 10 things that are on point and one thing that could be improved. And so providing staff with some feedback in areas where we've really hit the mark, incorporating accessibility and equity and creativity, and is also helpful to keep kind of the focus that we think reflects the opinions of the city. So I think positive feedback is also a really critical piece to providing to staff.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioner Vasquez.
I just wanted to say I think that the suggestion for us to provide stuff in writing is also helpful. But I also then question the point of a public forum, because I feel like, like I guess I thought, or my interpretation of this event was, we were going to be reviewing the plan and providing feedback as a commissioner. And obviously, I think, my feedback is from my perspective and not the commission as a whole, but, my own experience and my perspective as a resident of Vacaville. And so I think that I just kind of find it odd that we're going to shift from providing feedback verbally to them providing it in writing. I'm fine with doing that, but I do think that, I guess I just question then the opportunity for this to be a public forum. And I think oftentimes feedback may sound critical, but I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to provide feedback, again, from my perspective, my experience, and also to help enhance the document, not necessarily challenge or question the process or the existing document. The existing document, I think, is great. And I feel like I gave that feedback, and I think that, a lot of folks put a lot of time and energy into this, and this is my first time seeing it and my first review of the document. Again, I was not involved in the engagement pieces before, and so I think it's just from my perspective in terms of, my reading of the document. And I guess before we go to public, my last note on the document that I feel like I'd like to share publicly and not necessarily in writing to staff, I think that the public should deserve to hear our opinions, is the section guidelines by park classification. In both the neighborhood parks and community parks and the minimum park features, there seems to be an item about lighting missing. Like, is lighting not considered a minimum park feature? It's nowhere else in the features. And then also in neighborhood parks and community parks, additional features, there's no mention of backstops or maybe field posts. And so is that something that is also missing? And yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, ma'am. And would one of the consultants like to address Commissioner Vasquez's comments or questions, ma'am?
Chairman McMahon, this is Director Walker.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to share that I do think that it is important that the commissioner's comments be made in public. So I'm not sure how long that will take, but I think that that is the best approach to take.
Okay, with all that said, we will continue to address commissioner comments and questions with the consultant. And again, I would just say that this is a continual effort to improve this document. It is a working document. So, if after the meeting, if we still have comments and questions, let's please ensure that the staff gets that, as well as the consultants. Again, this will go to, I believe, the Planning Commission, and it does come back to us as well, and eventually to the City Council. So, yes, I want to ensure that everybody's questions and comments are addressed. And I would also like to open it to the public here at the appropriate time. So, we want to hear everybody. So I appreciate that, Director Walker. Commissioner Leonard.
Thanks, Chair. I don't want to belabor the point. I think Commissioner Vasquez, your feedback is really invaluable and critical. So it's not intended to mask that or hinder that. I think as a commissioner, I feel like I have access in lots of meetings to provide feedback. And as I perceive a public forum, it's really about the community's feedback. And we have 18 people who have taken time out of their Saturday. And I just want to make sure that we are reserving time with a primary focus of community feedback, commissioner feedback is important, but not at the expense of the opportunity for community feedback. So if we can just, as commissioners, balance that and make sure that we're leaving time to hear from the people that we're serving, that's all I'm asking. And I see all points and I can agree with everything.
Thank you very much for that, ma'am. And again, for the commission, we will come back at the end of public comment to address any further questions or comments from the commission. Okay, with all that said, are there any further comments or questions from the commission now? And if not, we will go to public comment, and then we will come back to the commission for follow-up comments or questions. Vice Chair Rucker, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. Just one question. You know, I know we talked a little bit about inclusivity, specifically relating to special needs. I don't know if those words were used exactly, but can MIG, can you all talk to maybe some of the plans that we have for inclusivity within special needs communities, within our parks, and really what we're doing about maybe accessible features going forward?
You cut out a little bit for me there at the end. You talked about what's in place within the department and other city plans around population for people with disabilities and special needs. And then it cut out a little bit on the second point there. And, you know, I think...
Yeah, I think you got it. Okay.
Well, as I mentioned, the department had, from our observation, has exhibited some leadership around therapeutic recreation. And I would turn it over to Carrie to really speak to that, because I think that's been a focus under her leadership at the department. We don't always see a dedicated program area when we work in communities of this size. And anyhow, so it was something we noticed early on and found that notable.
Okay, no worries. I know Director Walker and I have talked extensively, and I know she has she has a huge commitment to that. So I personally don't need to hear anything else from her. I was just more hoping what we could do, you know, what specifically within this plan we had that related to, you know, the special needs community.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why there is a recommendation around universal access rather than, which is more expansive and inclusive than simple ADA compliance, which is important, but, you know, it's going beyond that in terms of physical facilities.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, once again, any comments or questions from the commission at this point? Okay, very good. I appreciate it. And we will come back for commissioner comments, questions at the end of public comment. Madam Secretary, I do see that we have some of the public in attendance, and I do see a hand raised now. If we are ready, let's go ahead and open public comment, please.
Okay. Santiago, I will open your mic.
Thank you for taking my call. This comment is for Commissioner Mary. Thank you for listening to your community. Thank you for having talked to us, and thank you for putting it out there. I know Jennifer and Sean, you want to go a different direction by maybe putting it in writing, but I think the public needs to hear what input Commissioner Mary wants to put in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, sir.
We'd like to also do the polling questions at this point. And so Tracy or Joey, would you be able to initiate those? And then we have a few questions.
Okay, yeah, if you'd like to put a polling question up now, I know that we do have a few more hands raised from the public, but we can put one of the polling questions up now, ma'am. Okay, so for our public, or actually, Lauren, if you would like to go ahead and explain the polling question, please.
Sure. So we just have a few just to get a sense of who's in the room. This repeats a question that we asked through other public involvement opportunities. So how long have you lived in Vacaville? And as I mentioned at the beginning, attendees can participate in polling. This isn't something that commissioners can do because it is anonymous. So we don't know who's, who is giving which option. And so, so on the screen, we have some long-term residents, but we also have folks who have moved here more recently, and a couple folks who don't live in Vacaville, but I imagine you live nearby or you have interests, whether it's jobs or schools in the city. So thank you for that. We have, let's do another polling question, then we'll move on to attendee comments. So next question though, we have 2 or 3 kind of openers. We just want to get a sense for folks here. You can write it into the chat. Again, attendees are able to do that. Want to learn a little bit about your favorite park or facility, just so we also have a sense of, is that aligning with what we heard previously? So seeing Andrews Park, yeah, pretty central. Lagoon Valley Park, we heard a lot about that. No specific favorite. So, while people are thinking about that, thinking about their favorite park, you can continue to put things in the chat, but let's stop polling for a moment and then look at some of the hands raised. So we'll come back to polling in a minute, but then let's hear from our 2 attendees who have their hands raised. Turn it back over to the chair.
Perfect, Lauren. Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, I see hands raised from the public. Can we take our next caller, please?
Christina, I'll open your mic.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to thank all of you for taking your time out of the day to do this and to educate the public on these topics and these progresses that are bringing into the city. I do wish that, or I do compliment Commissioner Vasquez for asking these questions so that we can fully understand this presentation with the most clarity as possible. And I do feel that making the comment that it should be in the notes, it does take away from the public seeing the full transparency of this process and understanding what the city staff does, as well as the commission and the governing decisions that are made for our city. So I would like the questions to still be asked, and I would like for us to continue to educate ourselves no matter how long it takes, because time is valuable, and when we're learning with our time, that's the best that we could possibly be doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, ma'am. Okay, why don't we take another caller, please? Next caller.
Aisha, I'll open your mic.
Good morning, Aisha. I think you're on mute, ma'am.
Aisha, to unmute, if you can press *6.
Perhaps we can come back to Aisha. Are there any other callers at this point, ma'am?
Yes. Danielle, I'll open your mic.
Okay, let's take Danielle and then let's come back to Aisha, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Danielle, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to say thank you to the commission and to MIG for putting on this presentation and having the opportunity for community members to be part of the discussion. I'm a mom of 4 young boys here in Vacaville. I'm a 40-year resident. I've lived here my whole life. I was really excited to hear the questions from Commissioner Vasquez. I hope they do get addressed today. I think that what she was asking was representative of discussions that have been going on in the community. I think that these are all really relevant topics. I'm particularly interested in hearing more about inclusivity and diversity within our parks for all demographics and for the special needs community. I also really liked that comment. And I want to get the opportunity to talk about that kind of stuff today. I trust in that the Parks and Rec Commission knows a lot that we might not know as citizens. And so I value their input in this meeting as well as having the opportunity to talk. I appreciate the land acknowledgement. I would love to see that. I would love to see that in the actual parks. And I also liked a lot of the feedback as far as having like natural opportunities for play within parks. Thank you.
Danielle, thank you very much for your comments, ma'am. Okay, let's see. Aisha, were we able to get her back on the line, Tracy?
Aisha, your mic is still open. I'm not sure if, oh, there you go.
Here I am. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I too wanted to just echo everything that Commissioner Vasquez said. I live on the 8-7 side, and I have noticed that there does seem to be some inequities as far as the park management on this side of town versus what happens on the other side of town. So I appreciate everyone that's put their time in to put this presentation together. And I'm really hoping that we can see a lot of that inclusion that we strive to see on this side of town as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And at this point, it looks like we have an additional hand raised. And Madam Secretary, can we go ahead and take the next caller, please?
Yes, Sarah, I'll open your mic.
Good morning, commissioners. I'd just like to echo the sentiments of the community. Thank you, Commissioner Vasquez, for your dedication to equality and inclusion. It's incredibly important, and it does seem to be something that this commission and planning commission has sort of batted away as being insignificant in the past. And so I really appreciate you speaking up for that. Another citizen, I live on the 8-7 side, and I also echo the sentiment that I believe the only information session over here was unattendable basically for me. And I'm pretty involved in the city, and I often keep an eye out for such things on the 8-7 side and do often see them mostly on the 8-8 side. And so without you guys getting defensive, as you did with Commissioner Vasquez, just, you know, take that criticism and run with it. We would also like to be involved in things like planning and Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, to the consultant, do we have any further pop-up questions? Maybe it might be a nice time to do that now.
Yes. So I think it would be great to move to actually polling question around priority. And so Tracy, if you bring that one up. So this polling question asks, what should be the top priority as funding is available? So upgrades to existing neighborhoods and parks is one option. Building more trailheads and trail connections. And I think you'd be hearing a theme here. Completing additional phases at community parks. So those larger parks, Centennial, Andrews, renovating Lagoon Valley Park, and then some focus on those major facilities. And then a programmatic one, you know, when it's safe to do so, putting on community events, which has been a focus in the past, and it has been a really popular activity. The concert series, movies, those kinds of things. Okay, so I'll give it just another minute. Not everybody is, not every attendee is participating, but I think you probably had enough time if you choose to share your priorities. So, you know, in line with what we heard during the public engagement process and opportunities earlier on, there is a lot of interest in neighborhood parks, the parks that people use every day, and doing a refresh on those, the trails and trailheads. You know, in this case, no one here participating chose Lagoon Valley Park. That was, you know, that was something we heard earlier on because so many people go there. But that's why there's a lot of different outreach opportunities. We have to overlay all of those things and kind of triangulate about what's most important to do first. And, you know, maybe today, the fact that that's kind of a bigger ticket item, maybe that's something that is coloring folks' responses. Great. I'd also be curious if thinking about these priorities has gotten any attendees thinking about, you know, a particular project or a priority maybe that's not on this list, or something really specific that they want to make sure we hear about. And I'm also going to invite my colleague, Joey, to share the digital whiteboard behind the scenes. He's been taking all kinds of notes as people have made comments. And so we're capturing those, as well as having the, you know, the recording of this meeting. And so he's really focused on commissioner comments and questions and additional comments, you know, capturing your feedback about favorite parks. And, you know, some of the commissioner comments so far have been about elements they'd like to see included in the plan that might not be there now or might be missing. And I would ask community members, many of you have echoed that you agree with commissioner comments, but if there's other things that are missing, now is an opportunity to raise your hand and share that, and Joey will record that up here on the board.
Thank you, Lauren. Are there any further public comments, questions for the consultant? Okay, Tracy, I see no hands. Is that correct?
No other hands at the moment, Chair. Okay,
very good. So at this point, why don't we close public comment, please? And I'd like to bring it back to the commission for any questions that weren't asked or not addressed during the first round. Comments from the commission are questions. Okay, at this point, I see no further questions from the commission. Lauren, I see no further hands, ma'am.
Okay. There's, I'm surprised. I'm surprised. It sounds like there, you know, there might be more commissioner feedback, and you know, we don't want to belabor everybody's morning, but this is also, as so many of you have said, this is a good opportunity to share public priorities. I think we've gotten, you know, a good sense that the equity values need to be uplifted in the plan more intentionally in the earlier chapters. The idea around more mention of the indigenous populations whose land Vacaville is on and who are still present today, and making stronger connections with that, not only in a land acknowledgement, but also thinking about how that might fit into some of the goals, and especially goal 2. Some specific feedback around individual goals, and I'm sure there might be some more that comes with that. Definitely heard some strong feedback about the making sure that the affordability of programs and that there be a range of program types from free, you know, and open to all up to the fee-based programs. And then also just some feedback around some of the projects and making sure that's synced up. And it looks like there's a...
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Leonard has a comment or question.
Oh, I wanted to make sure I'm understanding, because I thought you were asking for questions or things that we hadn't covered yet. Are you just asking kind of to hear from each commissioner? And if so, I would reiterate I love seeing the movement in kind of incorporating and celebrating our open spaces and our native spaces, as well as Indigenous people. I think that's unique to our city. Lagoon Valley Park in its open space is a fantastic resource that is close by. And I would just add, beyond what has already been said along those lines, is as we talk about open spaces and preserving the natural flora and fauna around us, that we be mindful of planting native species and incorporating native plants into some of our parks, as that is, if it's conducive to the space and what's happening there.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Leonard. Any other commissioner comments or questions? You know, it's extremely important what we're doing here today, because this is, you know, we're talking about a 15 to 20 year plan. This is for our children. It's for our grandchildren. We recognize the integral part to quality of life in Vacaville, providing places to socialize, exercise, learn, and play. And it is extremely important that it's equitable and inclusive for all. So it's important what we're doing here today. I really appreciate the commissioner comments as well as the public comments as well. So it's good. And again, this is a working document, and we're continually striving to make it the best we can for our future generations. And I see Commissioner Vasquez has her hand raised.
Hi, I just wanted to share, I mean, I guess since there's no other comments, I guess I'll share some more comments that I had on the implementation section. There was a sentence in the first paragraph, the very last sentence, that says costly or contingent on other efforts. I'm just wondering, what does that mean? Other funding efforts? What are other efforts? And then in table 6.2, there's a mention of a new senior center. And I'm just wondering if that is being considered in Southtown instead of on the 8-8 side, since we already have a current existing senior center. And then I also just had the same question as you, Chair McMahon, about there was no mention of recent master plans that the commission has reviewed. like Nelson, Alpatch, and then even just Markham Brown in the action plan for the next 5 years, 21 through 26. So that was just my other note and thought.
So the contingent on other efforts, for example, a funding question like a grant application. And so the point is that this, that not everything is within the current level of control. Some things are dependent on development. Some things are dependent on other outside sources. And so that's just what that is intended to get at. And then in terms of things missing from the action plan, that's feedback we would want to add. It's one of the criteria is moving forward things that are underway. Things that are active capital projects now, the assumption was by the time this gets adopted, they're going to be underway and, maybe didn't need to be included in the action plan. And so, there might have been a kind of a misunderstanding about how far along some of those are, because the larger project list definitely mentions some of those. There's so much activity that's happened around master plans, including one that was just adopted last month, which is really that's been one of the things that's been kind of neat for Ellie and I, that there's just been so much going on and always so much action, and looking at the park system and the downtown and other things in this city. It's actually been sometimes hard to keep up.
Commissioner Vasquez, would you like to make further comments, ma'am?
I guess my only other thought when looking at this plan was, what are our comparables? Like, what are City of Vacaville's Parks and Recs? What are the comparables that we're looking at in terms of other towns? Either, I'm assuming we would be looking at comparables in the state of California, but what are those references? And then also there's a reference to districts and the transition of city governance to districts. And the statement was that the implications are not known. And so I guess I question, what does that mean in terms of, are we looking at comparables to City of Vacaville, and then also comparables about towns that have transitioned to districts? And what are those? I guess the implications aren't known for Vacaville, but I'm sure that there was probably impacts to other towns as they transition to districted elections. And then my final thought is how 2020 census data, when that is released, how that will impact the master plan and assessing the plan either annually or every 5 years.
Thank you, Ellie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lauren, would you like to address that, please?
Yeah, there within the recommendation, and I can't remember which goal off the top of my head, there is actually getting at the census issue, is kind of taking another look, and not just with community members, but when new data comes in. And so we can look back at that and make sure that's pretty specific, because that will be coming out here in the next year or so, and it will show some of the changes that have happened, even in just the last 5 years. And then the districting, when we were drafting this plan, it was actually before the district elections had come into play. And so there's some of that statement, was written probably back in July. And we do work in cities that do have districts. And, a bigger one right nearby where we're working right now is Sacramento, but plenty of smaller ones too. It's a little less common though to be working in a city where they've gone from at large to districted, and so there might not be that many comparables, specific to was there an effect on the park and recreation system.
Thank you, Lauren.
So I don't know that answers that question, but that's just my observation.
Thank you for that, ma'am. Commissioner Vasquez, any further questions at this point, ma'am?
No, I guess my thought would be then maybe some additional research could be done on that in terms of the impacts of districted elections.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Commissioner Leonard?
This may be premature and not, planned down the road. One of the things that seems a very limited resource in the city is indoor gym space, and indoor gym space spread out across the city, so that we're meeting people where they're at, and we're meeting youth where they're at, and they're not dependent on transportation and things like that. So do we have plans to really get concrete data? Is that just a perception that people want that, or is that something that people really want? It would seem from anecdotally that we really do need to focus on indoor gym space for youth and adults across the city. Would be a thought that I had in terms of how do we really know, and that seems like a shortcoming there for us. The other thing is, from the lens of if we're meeting people where they're at in their neighborhood parks, and I understand that neighborhood parks don't typically have the same amenities that regional parks or community parks have, but have we looked at opportunities to create smaller versions? So rather than a full-size soccer pitch, a miniature soccer pitch, where there could still be some play and practice in those areas without having to go to a full-size. I don't mean organized practice. I mean, just family play and community play in those spaces. And have we been mindful of different variations? If we can't accommodate the full scale, have we looked at options, or do we have an attitude, I guess, to look at options where we can create modified versions so we are still really proactively meeting people right where they live, right down the street, to do the things they love to do, and still stay within the reality of our budget constraints?
Thank you, ma'am.
On that one in particular, that is actually behind the size of the lawn area that should be in every neighborhood park. Exactly that issue, that it be big enough that you could have that kind of pickup activity or a quick practice in a neighborhood park, even if it didn't have a formal field. So there was some thinking along the lines of what you're saying, so that people had that opportunity close to home and didn't have to go across town to, Centennial Park or something like that.
Thank you. And to Ms. Vasquez's point, are we recording that as a philosophical approach, that we keep in perpetuity? And maybe it's not appropriate, that's just one person's opinion, but are we kind of documenting those kind of attitudes in the document as well?
Yeah, I think the language, by putting the language in there around, multiple uses and building that flexibility into parks, that's what the intent is. So we can take a look at that and make sure it's strong enough to get at what you're saying, that, yeah, this is our position.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to address again, what Commissioner Vasquez brought up, and that's in Chapter 6 about implementation. I'm really concerned about the 5-year action plan for specifically Owl Patch and Nelson Park. So I really think that we need to ensure that that doesn't get lost in this process.
Yep, we will bring that feedback into the next iteration. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like again to ask any further questions or comments from the commission. Vice Chair Rucker. Vice Chair Rucker, we're having trouble hearing you, sir. I cannot hear Vice Chair Rucker. Can anybody else?
It's very, very faint.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, Ryan, we're unable to hear you, sir.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Perfect. So what I was going to communicate is on the A7 side of town, we have Green Tree, which I know is private land right now, but it is huge, open, developed space that we have no idea as a city, at least I don't, what we're going to do with it. Was there any contingency plans in terms of, Green Tree and what that could look like in the future? If it's, if there were plans that were changed there. I know for the past couple of years, it's just been empty space. And I hope that the city, I know we have some plans for it, but I guess my bigger question was there any contingency plans for that development area within Vacaville?
This is Director Walker, Chair McMahon. We do have community development.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We do have Community Development Director Fred Baderi on the line, as well as our Park Planner and Park and Rec Master Plan Project Manager Hugh Hesterman on the line. They may want to share a little bit of information related to Green Tree.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Fred. Would you like to address some of Vice Chair Rucker's concerns, sir?
Yes, certainly. This is Fred Buderi with the Community Development Department. So we are currently working with the owners of the Green Tree property and the adjacent neighborhoods on preparation of the owner's draft master plan for development of the property. It would include a variety of residential and non-residential uses, but also will address park needs for that neighborhood and address, where possible, needs in the overall community's park and recreation system. So Park Planner Hesterman has been participating regularly in meetings that we hold with the project's development team. They are still preparing their draft land use plans for that property. They have been meeting individually or regularly rather with representatives of the adjacent neighborhood, but as that plan gets further along in its development, we will be starting the environmental analysis and larger scale analysis that will introduce the applicants' draft plans to the wider community and seek additional input and involvement in that. So that plan is ongoing. We are working with the owners there, and it will address both neighborhood park needs and other recreational features and facilities that may be potential there. Hugh, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that in the details of the park system that we've been discussing with the developer there, but that would be fine.
Sure, this is Hugh Hesterman. Just for the public's information, on the city's webpage, there is information on all the major development that are being considered and worked on around town. And the Green Tree project does have quite a bit of information available if you want to take a look at that site.
Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Vice Chair Rucker, any further questions or comments, sir?
No other questions, just the comment, mainly because I don't have that much time left on the commission. I know originally when plans came out, I think 2 years ago when I was looking at it, the park was scheduled to be a neighborhood park. I know we've talked extensively about really increasing that ratio between residents and developed park space that we have within town. Right now, we're significantly under that. So I don't want to detour us too much. And I do believe that MIG and the city have worked really well on a 15 to 20 year plan to be able to increase that. But I've always seen Green Tree as such a huge opportunity. And if it is developed, and I know there's so much that's out of my hands, I would just like to be able to see that as an area within the city that we could really make some improvements and provide just some space that really all of us could be proud of. And I say that as an A7 resident as well. So there's that. Just wanted to throw that comment in there before my time on the commission comes to an end.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Okay, it looks like we're nearing the end of our meeting. And once again, I will open it up to, I want to ensure every commissioner is heard with either a question or comment at this point. So we will just ensure that happens prior to wrapping up this meeting. And it looks like we have Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree, and I wholly endorse all of the comments about diversity and inclusion that other commissioners and public have stated. I agree with that 100%. I also endorse all of the open space development and open land. I think those are great resources that Vacaville should capitalize on. But I do want to also comment that we have a huge sports contingency of residents in the city of Vacaville. On the community needs and priorities, sports fields was listed as number 4 as the most valued park and recreation features. But on table 5, it was listed as the second. Youth sports programs was listed as the second most recreational programming improvements and additions requested. So we do have a large sports community here in Vacaville using the existing facilities. I think there's opportunity as Vacaville grows to expand those and develop those. As I mentioned earlier, maybe consolidate, multi-use sports into a single complex that can manage, different types of round or diamond and square sports. But there's an outstanding opportunity here, and I know there are plans on the master plan for the future, Centennial, the sports complex, all those things. But I just wanted to comment on that, that we do have a very large sports contingency here in Vacaville, and people who are very active every single weekend. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Multi-use sports fields are it just seems to be more bang for the buck, and that way we can get our kids out there on those fields. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Any further commissioner comments? Commissioner Bruin. Commissioner Bruin, I believe you need to unmute, sir.
Sorry about that. I always do that. Get the
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank all of our fellow commissioners for all the comments and everything, especially Mr. Commissioner Vasquez, and for being so thorough on the draft. And as it says, it is a draft. And from what I'm hearing from the public, doesn't feel like the 95687 is being represented correctly. Do we have any more pop-ups going out there so we can open up to that public so we can get more feedback, or is that out of the question?
Director Walker, would you like to address that question, ma'am?
I can say that at this time, there is nothing planned for specific to the 95687 in terms of pop-ups. You know, that piece of the community engagement was wrapped up some time ago. I will share though that there was, as was mentioned, one of the expos at one or two community engagement exercises at the expo that was hosted at Three Oaks Community Center. And then there was also community engagement that was held at the Ulatis Community Center. I don't have that tab pulled open to give specific, you know, dates when those occurred, but I do know that one was held at both of those locations, as well as the Performing Arts Theater. So there was some engagement that took place in the 95687 area of the city.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Bruman, further questions or comments, sir?
Yeah, I have some more. I'm sorry about my dog in the background. She's a little barker.
That's quite all right.
At the same time, I know Commissioner Rudd.
Commissioner Bruman, we lost your, we can't hear you, sir. Let's give him 1 second there. For some reason, we lost his verbal communications. Commissioner Bruman, can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, now we got you.
Oh, you lost me?
Yes, sir. We didn't hear much of what you had to say. So if you want to take it from the top, sir.
Okay. I know that we've been talking about hopefully getting upgrading some of the community parks with ADA swings or something like that for the disabled. And I think that should be a priority to our existing parks so that we can get that done. And I don't know where it sits on the list of improvements, on what chapter that fell on. But I'd like to see something like that be put into place.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Any further comments, sir? Okay, I believe that is it. Okay, let me do this. I want to go down the list, and if you, as a commissioner, have any further comments, questions, closing comments, please, I would love to hear from you, as well as the consultant as well. So we'll start at the top. Commissioner Bruman, any further questions or comments, sir?
No, I'd just like to thank Ellie and Lauren for their presentation on the draft. And I know there's a lot of things that go into that. And hopefully we can be as transparent as possible to the public, because it seems to be a few things that people don't feel that we're taking care of. And hopefully it all comes out at the end, in which we're doing a great job. City staff is doing a great job. And thank you to our fellow commissioners for all their input.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Commissioner Leonard.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of work goes into this over years, and so I echo Commissioner Bruman's sentiment on that. It's a lot of effort. I think as commissioners and staff, if we are willing to separate from our intentions to perceptions and how people receive, maybe we should really hear, and I know there's probably intent to do so, do more pop-ups further into 8-7, maybe on the South Alamo side. But I don't mean that as a criticism of staff efforts, because I know that there have been extensive efforts. But again, maybe we could just create opportunities, new opportunities for people who didn't know at the time to engage and get those perceptions. But this is exciting. It's exciting to see all the ideas and possibility for our city. And again, I think Commissioner Vasquez and her commitment to the detail and the community engagement and really pushing the issue of equity and inclusion is important. And we're very lucky to have that perspective. So to stay focused on those two things as well is also important. But thank you for a great morning.
Thank you, ma'am. I agree 100%. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank Ellie and Lauren for their presentation and all the work they put into this, city staff and all the other commissioners for all your comments this morning. I think there's some outstanding opportunities here. And I hope that we can continue to capture the community's needs and their perspectives, because I think that is important, as other commissioners have stated. So I agree with that entirely. And I do appreciate everyone taking, 2 to 3 hours on their Saturday morning to dedicate to this and the time. So thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Vasquez.
I just wanted to thank MIG and staff for all their efforts on this. It's a really exciting plan, and I'm really thankful to be involved in this process and provide a voice for the public and the community. And just wanted to thank everyone for their time on a Saturday morning, and thank all the commissioners and the team for their contributions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Rucker.
Thank you very much. MIG, you all have been wonderful partners for us for the past couple of years. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been really honored to sit in a couple of those meetings, especially because when I started, I was brand new and had no idea what I was doing. And now I, have a little more idea, but still, feel like there's a lot to learn. So thank you all. And just, I've always felt that Vacaville has just incredible potential when it comes to just really our location within Northern California, and the bones of our city are good. And I really truly believe in this Parks Department. I believe in its leadership, and I really believe in this plan and making it better. That's why I'm really appreciative of the commissioner comments and the public comments, because there's really only positivity can come out of that. So thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Vice Chair Rucker, thank you so much. I do see, even though we've gone through public comment, I do see 2 hands raised. And again, I want to ensure that the public is heard this morning. These are your parks. So I would like to go back to our 2 hands raised from the public and allow them to voice their concerns or questions, please.
Okay, Santiago, I'll open your mic.
Well, thank you to the consultants and to the commissioners for having this meeting. I just wanted to make a comment towards the consultant when she said about the open space fields at or open, or at the park where it's open. Those of us who I have 5 kids and they practice soccer and they're involved in soccer. Without goalposts, you really can't practice the sport. So I think you can't just go down to a field and then just kick the ball around without any soccer posts. Just wanted to make that clear that, with a basketball, you need the basketball goalpost. With baseball, you need a backstop. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, I see one more hand raised. Tracy, if we could open their mic, please.
Yes, Lizette, I'll open your mic.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we hear you perfectly.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I had several meetings booked this morning and I definitely wanted to participate, but thank you for the opportunity to make public comment. I'm a proud Vacaville resident and also the county superintendent of schools. And on behalf of the young people that we serve, many of them with moderate to severe disabilities, and also our young people who are the neediest. I'm just so grateful for all of the work that the Parks and Rec Commission has done on this project, and thank you to the consultants for continuing to really look at looking at the needs of all of our residents in our community in terms of inclusion and accessibility. So I'm just so grateful, and thank you for the opportunity to address the commission and to thank you for your advocacy on behalf of the young people that we serve.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your comments. And Madam Secretary, are there any further hands from the public, ma'am?
There are no more hands, Chair.
Okay, with that said, I would just like to say again, thank you to everyone. It's encouraging to see so many people on this meeting this morning from the public. We appreciate it. Again, I can't stress, these are our parks, they're your parks. And, you know, the people that have the privilege of sitting on the commission, you know, we want to ensure that the parks are inclusive and equitable for everybody in this town. It's very important, and it's a continual quest to do that. So it's much appreciated. Thank you to the consultant. Thank you to the staff that have worked very hard on this for several years now. So with that said, I would like to allow Director Walker, if you would like to make any final comments, ma'am, as well as the consultant.
Sure. Thank you, Chair McMahon. I just wanted to again thank everyone for participating. Much appreciated. Got some great feedback. Again, really appreciate it. I wanted to let everyone know what kind of the next step in the process is. The consultants, and Ellie, Lauren can speak to this, I'm sure are going to be very busy over the next couple of days and incorporating many of the comments and information into the plan. And then the next step is to present the plan to the Planning Commission on February 16th. It'll be another opportunity for the public to listen in and engage and comment, as well as the planning commissioners. It will be an information only item. Again, that will be Tuesday, February 16th at 6 o'clock. And I'll turn it over to Lauren. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you all for devoting your Saturday morning to this. And echoing what Terry just said, we got some really good feedback. I think some great ideas for refinement and for some things that need to be added. You know, one thought that I would share, you know, the looking at the 8-7 side of town, perhaps one of the things that could address that would be adding a recommendation about doing more specific engagement about, you know, kind of the action phase of this. Because what I'm hearing this morning is not that the direction seems to be about right, and this is a high-level plan, but it's really about the ongoing relationship and communications. And so anyway, that might be a way to address that. As Carrie mentioned, this is not the only opportunity. This is a public process to refine this plan and adopt it. And so if you have additional written comments, those can come in and be shared with Tracy, who has been, you know, such glue behind this process. And as you can see from this meeting, she really makes sure everything's smooth. So she'll be the point of contact for additional written comments. We'll be sharing the comments here today and this discussion with the Planning Commission. And then the next time the Parks and Recreation Commission sees this plan, it will be a revised version that considers all of this feedback. So again, I thank you all for your time, and both commissioners and members of the public. And, we are really pleased that we've gotten to work with Vacaville about this important component of the community. And it's great when there's people that are passionate and care. We like working in communities like that. So I'll turn it back to the chair. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. And we are very fortunate to live in Vacaville, and you are correct. It's a very passionate and engaged community. And I just want to ensure that we also just express what you just said, Lauren. And, if there are further questions or comments, please email the city staff. And Hugh Hesterman, our park planner, does an outstanding job. He would probably be a good person to email if there are any further questions from the public. And again, I would encourage the commission to do the same. If there's things that aren't addressed, let's go ahead and get those questions and comments to the consultant so we can make this park master plan the best it could be to represent the city and everyone in this city. So with that said, everyone, thank you. Have a great day, and we will adjourn this meeting till the next regular meeting of Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. Thank you.